The History Toll brings unfiltered history so you can know the truth and the sacrifices of women. She was only 15 when the army took her to a secret place, and what happened next was never meant to be recorded, remembered, or believed. History often remembers wars through maps, treaties, and victories, but wars are not lived on paper. They are lived in bodies. This is the story of a 15-year-old girl whose name was erased, whose suffering was never meant to enter the historical record, and whose life reveals how war treats the powerless, especially women. She would later be known only as Mrs. X, not because she chose anonymity, but because silence was forced on her for decades. Her story is not an exception, it is evidence. In January 1942, Japanese forces occupied Kuala Lumpur. For many civilians, occupation arrived as fear and uncertainty. For others, especially in rural villages, it felt distant, almost unreal. Mrs. X lived outside the city, in a small Chinese village. Her family believed what many families believed, that armies passed through cities, not villages, that distance meant safety. At 15, her life was defined by routine, not politics. She had never left home. She had never been alone with a man. She did not yet understand sex, power, and war. History had not yet found her. The day the army came. In December, the illusion of safety collapsed. Japanese troops entered the village without warning. They moved from house to house, not searching for weapons or resistance, but for young women. When they entered her home, there was no negotiation. Her parents tried to protect her. Her father was struck in the head. Blood spilled on the floor of the house meant to shelter them. She resisted without understanding why resistance no longer mattered. In that moment, childhood ended, not gradually, not symbolically, but violently. What happened next was not an accident of war. It was deliberate, it was public, and it was meant to break not just the girl, but the family watching. Afterward, the soldiers did not retreat in shame, they took her with them. From daughter to property. She was loaded onto a truck with other girls from the village. Some cried, some were silent, none were told where they were going. The truck drove toward Kuala Lumpur. This was not a random act of violence, it was the first step in a system. They were taken to a large house on Jalan Ampang. It did not look like a prison, that was intentional. Inside lived Japanese officers. Here, Mrs. X learned a new reality. Pain was scheduled, controlled, repeated. Crying did not stop it. Silence did not stop it. After some time, days or weeks she could no longer tell, she was moved again. Movement did not mean escape, it meant redistribution. Eventually, she was taken to a hotel. She was given a room, a bed, 2 meals a day, clean sheets changed daily. On paper, it looked organized, humane even. In reality, this was industrialized abuse. She was required to receive 10 to 20 soldiers a day, not occasionally, not during emergencies, every day. She learned quickly that survival required obedience. Smiling reduced beatings, refusal increased them. Some soldiers were drunk, some were sober. The difference did not matter. This was not desire, it was entitlement enforced by power. By now, she understood one truth clearly. She was not meant to live a life after this. She was meant to be used until the war ended. What comfort women really means. The Japanese military called women like her comfort women. The phrase is administrative. It sounds neutral. It sounds voluntary. It was neither. Before the war, prostitution existed in Japan. During imperial expansion, that exploitation was militarized. As Japan occupied territories across Asia, the military created a network of sexual slavery designed to control soldiers, prevent civilian assaults, and maintain morale. Women were recruited through deception, coercion, and force. Once taken, they were transported, confined, and controlled. This was policy, not rumor, not chaos. Mrs. X did not know she was part of a historical system. She only knew repetition, pain, and endurance. The war ended, the silence began. When the war ended, the system collapsed, but the damage remained. Mrs. X was no longer a child, but she had not been allowed to grow into adulthood. She returned to a world that did not want to hear her story. In many societies, victims were blamed. Shame was assigned to survivors, not perpetrators. So she stayed silent for decades. Governments rebuilt, alliances formed, peace was declared, and women like her disappeared from history, breaking the silence. It was only many years later that some survivors began to speak, not because the pain had faded, but because silence had become unbearable. Mrs. X shared her story not for sympathy, but for truth. She understood something history often avoids, that forgetting is not neutral, it protects power. Her testimony challenged official narratives, it forced governments to confront uncomfortable facts, and it reminded the world that war crimes do not expire. Closing, why remembering matters. Mrs. X was not a statistic. She was not collateral damage. She was a child whose life was taken, piece by piece, by a system that believed power justified everything. Remembering her does not change the past, but forgetting her ensures it will repeat. This is why stories like hers matter. This is why silence is dangerous, and this is why history must be told, unfiltered. At the History Told brings unfiltered history because truth is the only justice some survivors will ever receive.